because I tried to shoot film in grad school, but then they banned me from film. So
What do you mean?
Creative juice.
Hello, hello.
hello. Let's see if I can get my. Oh, there it is. All
There
right,
you go. I was
cool.
like, is he on? I don't know.
Oh yeah, I'm using my Fuji X-T3 as a webcam, so I have to. If I leave it sitting around, it turns off.
Okay.
So yeah.
Is there a limit to like how long you can record, or does it not?
Um, it's an hour per battery, and it's got like two batteries and it's plugged in, so probably not.
Okay, yeah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Today's like I thought it wouldn't be so busy, but it's
Oh
still
yeah.
busy.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna get a good rest and and be ready and aware. And then I was up till almost 2 o'clock shooting photos with a friend last night. So
Like 2 a.m.?
yeah.
Wow. What were you guys shooting?
Halloween spooky photos. So kind of we tried some ectoplasm photos or something.
What's
They
ectoplasma?
it's something they used to do in like the 20s or 30s or early days of photography. They would have, it's like you can see the spirit leaving the body or demonic forces or something, and they would like basically light paint, or they'd have like real obvious masks on people like
Yeah.
behind them, and they would be blurry and stuff. So we had this big ball of cotton, and she had it in her mouth, and I used the slow shutter speed and had fog in the air and stuff. So that should be interesting.
Was that your idea or your friend's idea?
That was my friend's idea, but we kind of have a tradition now of shooting spooky photos every October or September, October.
How long have you guys been doing that? Has it been?
Um, Technically, we did it probably the last 2 years, but then a few years before that. So this was probably our fourth one.
That's
Um,
cool.
the first one was just a simple Halloween costume. When I had first met her, she did Kiki from the cartoon.
Kiki's
Uh,
Delivery?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and that's kind of started it, I guess.
That's cool. Are
Oh
you
yeah.
making a video or is it just you guys are just doing a photo shoot?
I videoed the photo shoot, but yeah, we just did a photo shoot. I shot some black and white film and mostly, and I thought I was shooting some Lomo 400, and it was actually Cinestill 50, so it probably.
It's totally different.
I'm so bad at putting the little labels. Like it was a Hasselblad, so it's got this little clip, and I forgot to put the clip in this one. So other the little film box part, and I had no idea the last time I shot Cinestill 50 in a Hasselblad. It might have been February or something. So who knows?
I mean, hopefully, like it could be a happy accident or it goes all
Yeah,
blank.
yeah. So I'm trying to decide. I had shot half the roll, so I'm like, do I just give up this first half of the roll that I'm sure I shot at 50 and take the next half and push it 3 stops, or do I split the difference? So I'm trying to decide that part.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Maybe that adds to the spooky effect. Like, I don't know.
exactly. That's what I was saying. It's like somehow maybe it'll look really weird, or I'll make it black and white, and maybe that'll save it.
Yeah. Well, and see, when you like told me that you filmed it, now I'm thinking of like how you're gonna edit, and I'm just like curious, like, are you going to show like the previous shoots that you did? Because I feel like
Um,
you should if this has been like a tradition.
yeah, that's a good idea because I have last year's on the vlog, but I wasn't vlogging the year before that. So I have the photos though, so I can show the photos and then kind of show what we did last year. And because last year she had this vintage late 70s Halloween mask on top of her, like, and she was wearing this like kind of real kind of conservative dress, kind of with the collar, like an older dress. And she had this spooky vintage plastic mask with the rubber band around it and on, and they were a little darker looking, I guess.
Yeah. I gotta like see all of them, like the difference from like the first time and then the next.
Oh
So
yeah. And the first one that we did too, it'll be real striking because it was in a studio and I shot it on digital. And I think I had just gotten my first Hasselblad when I took the first one. So yeah, I was just barely figuring out how to work that thing.
So they're all shot in film. Is that?
Um, not quite all of them, but most of them.
Yeah.
They're yeah. She's been in a lot of my work through the years. So like there was a little period where it was all digital, like when I was in grad school, probably because I tried to shoot film in grad school, but then they banned me from film. So
What do you mean?
they were like, "Oh, you're so caught up in technique and stuff, and you need to just only concentrate on the photo, so you can't shoot film anymore." So I'm like, "Well, this sucks because I have a Mamiya 7 I bought to do this, and I wound up selling that, and then they asked me in a critique, and they're like, "Why are you shooting digital? I thought you shot film." I'm like, "You guys banned me from it." And they're like, "We did."
So then what did you end up doing? Are you saying you just shot digital instead, or you just?
Yeah, I pretty much like through the end of grad school I did, but then I got it was grad school is a an awful awful time.
Don't say
uh,
that. I'm looking into that right now.
um, no, I think it's mostly my specific one. There are
Yeah.
problems with the whole thing, like kind of nationwide, I'm sure, but it depends on the supportiveness of the professors and like listen to the students. Like, yeah, I mean, you've been around school probably enough to understand when people are saying something like, "Oh, I'm going to mark it well," and then when a student there is kind of like, you can tell they're a little off or this, like they're put out by this or whatever, and listen closely to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wait, when you going back, like you went to school for what did you major in, and then what did you go to grad school for?
I got my undergraduate degree in 2003 for journalism. I was a newspaper journalist and designer and copy editor for a few years. And then about 2006, I think it was, I quit that and became a freelance photographer. And then that was a few really, I call them years of desperate poverty. But I kind of like started getting things started getting better. And I moved to Minnesota to try to, like, I'm in Texas, by the way. Um, and then I moved to Minnesota because a girl, but also opportunity. And then neither of them worked out, but well, I started doing more when I was in Minnesota. I got a feel for how to like break into markets and how to meet people, and that's right when Twitter was starting too, and people were realizing that you could like meet people through that, and so I was starting to do pretty well, and actually met a retired architectural photographer. He was telling me how he's the guy who kind of told me how to set day rates, and which is still a formula that I use today and that I hear people basically use. But he said he would make $10,000 in a day doing architecture in around Minnesota, I think. And so I was doing okay there, but then the whole Great Recession thing happened, and it was just getting bad. So I wound up moving back to Texas, and I went back to my junior college because I started in junior college at Kilgore College, a tiny community college in East Texas, and the instructor there, he just retired, but his name is Rufus Lovett, and he's a he's worked for a lot of magazines. Like he shot for years for Texas Monthly and People Magazine and a bunch of other things, and he's had 3 books through the University of Texas Press, and he's a runner-up for the Life Magazine Eisenstadt Award, and lost only to Dan Winters. So I thought that was cool. But he was a teacher there, and I hadn't taken really many of his classes, even though I was friends with him and had worked with him as a student and everything. So I decided, this was like 2009. I took some classes. I took all of his classes and wound up working there part-time as basically his assistant and the assistant for the journalism teacher. And then finally, that led to grad school, which shall remain unnamed.
Yeah.
But to pursue an MFA, which became an MA because I got sick of them and dropped out, and they handed out MAs as punishment. So it's like, you're not good enough for an MFA. But uh, but yeah, so I got my MA and studio art, I guess, basically concentrating on photography.
Okay, cool. I mean, journalism and photography go hand in hand. And then I think
Yeah.
you also worked for the newspaper. I don't know which newspaper, if it was like school related or the actual just like newspaper.
I did work at my campus papers, but I also worked at the Longview and Nacogdoches, Texas newspapers, and I worked at the Denver Post for half a year, filling in for somebody who went on sabbatical.
Okay.
So I got my kind of got to feel uh, what it was like at a major metropolitan newspaper.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you do more portraiture, I feel like, but then instead of like leaning towards like documentary, I guess.
Yeah,
Is there a reason behind that?
that I do more portraits. Mainly just because I'm interested in people, I guess, most, and maybe that has something to do with journalism. Like, there's a rule in newspapers that you always have to have like a person's face in a photo in a publication, just because that's what sells, and the face has to be recognizable, so you don't get too many photos of places without anyone in them in a newspaper. And that's kind of how I was brought up. uh, but also mainly just because I'm more interested in interacting with people. And if you go back to like high school, I was very introverted and very shy, and I would go entire days of school, maybe weeks, where I would basically say here. And that was the only thing I said all day. It's like when they were calling roll, I'd say here. And but my senior year, I had kind of I had read I worshipped a magazine called Freestylin', which was a skate and BMX magazine. And one of the photographers for it, eventually the main photographer's name is Spike Jonze, the movie director. That was how he got his break out of high school. And so I was like, worship Spike Jonze from an early age. I'm like, I want to be like Spike. So how do I be like Spike? Get involved in publications because they have the cameras, because I'm too poor to afford a camera. So in high school, I joined my yearbook staff, which was possibly the greatest day of all of high school when I found out I made it on the staff, because I thought, all right, I'm going to get to use the camera like once a month or something. Now I walk in on the first day of class and they hand me the camera bag and they're like, no one wants to do this. Do you want to do it? And so like, I was like, it was Christmas in August, I guess.
That's cool. That's like, wow, we have something in common because I was also the yearbook photographer.
Nice.
But for me, it was more of like everyone just wanted to talk to me because they wanted their photo taken.
Yeah, that's where I kind of broke my introversion, because I went from, no one hated me or anything, I just kind of tried to be a fly on the wall. But I went from being that to everyone, from the kind of bully poor kids to the rich people who would not even acknowledge me before, and like all the cheerleaders and the football players, and they all wanted their picture taken. So it kind of broke me out of my shell, I guess.
I'm like, oh my God, like I'm
That's
fangirling
amazing.
about Spike. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Spike, if you ever get to look up, I mean, he was better known as a skateboard
Yeah, no,
photographer, like in trans.
100%. And I also saw
Yeah,
your comment on T's on
yeah,
Tatiana's thing. So I was like,
yeah,
it's hard like doing this kind of creative juice, but then I
yeah,
know someone.
yeah. That's so cool, because like the one thing I wish, like, I was so happy when that book came out, and if my camera weren't clamped right in front of it, the Spike Jonze book is literally right behind my camera.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really great. But his BMX photos were so good. All that energy, all of that that you see in his later work was all right there. And the person who was a publisher for that magazine, Bob Osborne, is still a phenomenal large format landscape photographer in Montana. But he was like a firefighter, and he started a magazine because his son, RL, was a big BMXer in the earliest days. And so he went, it's like, well, RL's doing this, I'm gonna just get pictures of him and put this magazine out for all these kids doing these crazy things. And so he started that, and his daughter Wendy started taking photos for it. And then Wendy was the one who taught Spike. So But those photo but Bob had that look of the kind of earlier skate photographers with the fish islands and all that stuff, and he kind of passed that on through BMX, and those guys all worshipped all the skate guys. So it's just such an interesting connection to that scene. So I've enjoyed Tatiana's videos about that.
I gotta look into that more. Like,
Yeah.
just because I know Spike's story, but I don't know necessarily like his inspiration and
Yeah.
how he created the stuff that he made. Yeah.
Yeah, and this story goes like it was called Wizard Publications in Torrance, California, that he was bored because he got hired as just a basic editorial assistant.
Yeah.
And he's like, then he decided, well, I'm gonna grab a Nikon and raid the refrigerator and see what happens. And that's kind of how he learned. Like Wendy would show him how to do stuff with the flash and everything, and one thing led to another.
That's cool.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you saw in the book, like when you first open it, it has like all the like credits.
Oh yeah.
And then when you look in like the like thin small print, that's like if you read up to here, email this email address.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I did. They didn't respond, but I was like, this is such a Spike thing to do. Like something
Oh
like little
yeah.
discreet and then like see if people notice it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Since you said you had the book, I wasn't sure if you saw it.
I need to look at it closer again. Like I thought about it for half a second. I'm like, I'm going to talk about Spike because I'm going to talk about how I got into photography. So I thought I should take out the book before I set up my camera, and I totally forgot.
Okay. But I'm glad that you know about it because a lot of people who don't really necessarily follow Spike, they don't know that he came out with a book.
Oh yeah, and I was so happy. And he had a BMX show in New York, I guess, a few years ago. Like they had a whole like clothing store or something with his BMX photos, and I was so hoping somebody was going to put out a book then of his BMX photos. But there was a suit of his BMX, like a dress suit with his photos printed all over it. That's like, well, it's something.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, his magazine, the people he worked with, and they're eventually the people he kind of like. I forget if he co-owned or he was just a member of it, but like Girl Skateboards, like they
I
put
think
out
he
his.
still
Yeah.
owns it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Andy Jenkins, who was like the art director for Girl for the first, I don't know, like first couple of decades or something, was the editor who hired him. And I just, that whole spirit of all of that is kind of what carried me into photography, because Bob hired Andy out of art school, and then Mark Luman, who is the second editor, said he hired him because Lou is what they called him, took all his graduation thank you cards and just wrote a letter to freestyling to in BMX action to Andy, and wrote him every day until he ran out of stamps that were intended for his thank you cards. And eventually Andy's like, you're hired. And then Spike took his SAT or something like that. And before he even finished high school, it's like, well, I took my SAT and it's, or the ACT or something. And it's like, okay, well, come out to California. And he came out to California, and there's just these kids, like almost literally kids, just given control of a whole national magazine. And you can see that kind of energy in the pages of those. And those are my dogs.
Okay, I have 2 dogs too.
Oh yeah. um, they think anyone who walks on the street is the enemy.
Same here. I have a ring alarm and dogs. It's like
Yeah,
yeah.
nothing's gonna get missed.
Wow. No, I didn't even know that you were like really into like, well, Spike, but also even this like when I saw your comment about like the BMX and the
Oh,
freestyle
yeah.
magazine, I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, I'm like learning slowly more about like, the people that I interact with on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess like even I find it interesting how many people are influenced by that scene, like Matt Day's a skater and all that. And so it's just so many people have that similar connection. And I was so excited too, like when I discovered Casey Neistat late, like way after everyone else. And then I saw a video and he actually had Spike Jonze on his vlog. So I thought I was like mind blown.
Two worlds colliding.
Yeah. And fun Spike story before I forget, but my older brother is basically, when you have like a older sibling, like just a few years ahead of you, they're like a perfect gateway into everything. So he was the one who got into BMX, who got me into BMX and music and so on. And but he wrote a letter to Spike right when Spike was breaking into music videos, and he hadn't quite crossed into movie directing yet. He wrote Spike a letter because that's what we did in those scenes back then. Like you'd write a letter and you'd actually get a response sometimes. Well, Spike actually responded to Eddie, my older brother, and sent him Girl Skateboard's Mouse VHS, and which had just come out at that point, and also his reel on VHS. And he wrapped it in a photocopied photo of himself and wrote a note and like wrapped it in a rubber band and sent it to him, and he still has it. So Spike Jones sent us his reel in like 1997 or something like that.
That's sweet.
Yeah. So it's like, not only is he cool, but he's actually like a really decent human.
I don't know. I don't know if I ever showed this, like, or you've seen it. I don't know if I've even posted this, or is it? This.
Oh, I love those.
So
Oh,
yeah,
is that like foil on the DX coating? They
yeah,
actually, oh, that's awesome. I have all of the Spike boards they put out a few years ago.
yeah.
I can't even, I haven't skated since I was like 19 or something.
Okay.
I'm 40 now. But I bought every board, like the Sonic Youth, Nirvana, Karen O, Bjork, and Sonic. No, I said Sonic. Well, Beastie Boys. That's it. Those are the boards. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so excited.
Wow, that's really like amazing to hear that you know all this history, and then you also had some sort of interaction. It's like a, you know, like what, like degree separation to him.
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting because like the other editors of Freestyling, they call themselves a master cluster because they worked on BMX Action Freestyling, Grand Royale magazine for the Beastie Boys, and this magazine called Dirt that Sassy put out. And they put all those out, and they were like 3 editors for all of this stuff in some capacity. But I had ordered some zines from Andy ages ago, and that's how I discovered zines in general, was through those people. And then Mark Luman was the last one, the kind of the writer of the bunch. Like Andy's a designer, Spike's a photographer, and Lou was the person who wrote. And he runs a design company in Portland, and they had these iconic like Freestyling magazine logo stickers. And I was too young and poor to ever actually have afforded them when they were out. And if anyone has them now, they sell them for outrageous amounts of money. But Lou's like, one day on Instagram, I was like, I found this box of Freestyling stickers. Does anybody want one? I'm like, you know, get on the phone. And he sent them to me. So I finally got my connection to all 3 of them. And so that was really cool.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't
Yeah.
even expect this whole conversation to go
Oh yeah.
where it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, I have all these things for Jamie.
Oh yeah. Oh, please feel
No,
free.
no, 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 no. I can nerd out about this
Oh,
any day.
oh yeah. That's how I can be with photo shoots too. Like the first time I meet someone, it's either going to be like, we're going to get great photos, or it's going to be like, I've got to figure this person out. And I always tell them like, it's the second time you shoot with someone that you really, because I shoot kind of, what do you call it? I improvise a lot, because I'll find out that I plan something just all the way down to the finest detail, and I shoot it and I get everything just right, and it's just really boring. And I guess it's an art to get everything planned and then have it be awesome. But so I kind of like have an area I think it's going to fall into, and have be ready for a few things, and I just kind of try to let it lead itself. And but a lot of times that also involves like, I have to know how it works with that person, because you can shoot, like if you haven't really seen that person much, you don't know if they have like this one certain awesome angle or whatever. And like I tell some people like, the low angle, when you shoot somebody on a low angle, it's going to be not flattering in so many ways most of the time, but occasionally you'll meet someone with this amazing jawline, and the low angle is the best shot ever. But you won't know that until you actually get out with someone and take pictures of them a bunch, or at least one time, and then kind of figure out how they work. and that's definitely a nice thing about, because I until recently I would shoot like 50-50. When I would bring film, I would still shoot some digital, so I could get a really nice digital one. It's like, see, it looks good, and they kind of get the idea. But it is different with film because, yeah, you kind of, I kind of go the flattery way, I guess. Like, oh, that looks so cool, or that looks really awesome, and that maybe that helps put them at ease. Like, okay, well, something's going on here. Because I've had a lot of shoots, even on digital, where I could tell the person totally wasn't getting it, or they thought it's like, oh, this is garbage. This person's just, let's just get through this, and then they see the photos and they're like super excited. But it's interesting how that works. But I know, like, I would have to. I'm in East Texas, so there's no, like, it's not like we don't have agencies. We don't have many. It's a little different now, but you kind of have to approach strangers in East Texas to get much going sometimes. So you'll wind up going like, I'm a photographer. Here's my business card. You'd, I think you would be a great portrait subject for my portfolio or something like that. And I'd hand them a card, and you can tell like half the time they're like, oh, it's a pervert. and but then, like, I'll wait about a day or two for them to go on my website or Instagram or whatever, and then a totally different tone when they see that I actually know how to use a camera. But there are a bunch of those guys with the wrinkly bed sheet, you know, porn photos around here.
Yeah, no, it's understandable why someone would like hesitate for a second,
hmm
because they probably are like, do they like, what are they trying, like their intentions
Yeah,
are. What
yeah,
I'm gonna say is like, just like real quick, like I've
yeah.
never been to Texas, so is there a difference in East Texas and the rest of Texas?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, Texas, as you can tell, is giant. So the cities like Dallas and Houston and stuff are pretty much like any other big city. Um, but the problem is, like, Texas is so big that East Texas as an area is kind of like, I forget how big it is, but basically, if I were to drive, it's an hour to go anywhere distance wise here. There's not much traffic, but it's an hour to get an hour's drive straight on just pure distance to get any similar sized city, and then it's like 3 to 5 hours to get to other population centers, and there's just not many people here. It's very rural. It's a lot of trees, and it's like a whole state in like a corner of a state, because it's just such a long drive. Like, to get to West Texas from Longview, where I am, is a 12-hour drive, and from El Paso in West Texas, where it's just 12 hours away, from El Paso to Los Angeles, California, is another 12 hours.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's just so expansive that, and there's not much of a population here, that we're kind of isolated. And and until, I guess, the internet, we weren't very connected either. And so it's a lot like that. We're a little behind, and when people, there's a like a dearth of young people. Like, people get out of high school and then they leave and they never come back until maybe they're raising a family. So, like, between 19 and 35, there's like almost no one.
Interesting. And you were born and raised over there, or?
Yeah, I was born in Longview, raised in Kilgore, which is about 30 minutes away. Now, I've lived like in Minnesota briefly, in Denver, but most of my life has generally been in this area.
Yeah. That's why I was like, I had to clear that up because I was
Oh
like, I've
yeah,
never
sorry.
been there, so I was like,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
even know what's the difference.
Yeah, like, the cities are much more progressive and liberal and stuff. And East Texas is like the it's not the it's the Bible Belt, so it's very Bible Belt.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, what I was gonna say is, I'm trying to figure out where we were going with this because
Oh
you
yeah.
were mentioning East Tech. Oh, because you were saying scouting models. Okay,
Oh
got it.
yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say that even though, despite like I live right next to New York City,
Yeah.
everyone knows that I'm someone like I could be just walking and then I see like a face. I have to go up to them. Like I feel
Oh
so
yeah.
guilty if I don't stop them and even try to be
Oh
like,
yeah.
hey, like I know you don't know me, but like, is it
Yeah.
possible I could like photograph you? And everyone says, oh, Joan, you're a girl. It's too easy. Like, of course,
Oh,
you know.
yeah. But no, because I understand why people would be more weary of a guy going up to them and doing that. But I also, that's why I'm like, I have my professional business card, and and I just keep it short and like see my website, and you'll kind of see. And I don't like hold it against them if they seem really nonplussed or whatever when they get it,
Yeah,
because but most of the time almost no one says no eventually.
that's good.
And yeah, so my success rate is pretty solid, so yeah.
5 stars.
Yeah.
Was as that's another thing that I'm like so curious about because most like male photographer friends I have, they go to wanting to photograph females more, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, like, what's your reasoning? Because I've seen obviously
Yeah.
more female than male.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true, and it's been hard for me to kind of figure that out. And like, this was a major point of contention in grad school, and they're like, oh, let me desauce their language a little bit. They're like, you are making assault fantasies about these women, and like, I don't, I really don't think so. And you try to be open to what people tell you, and it's like the criticism and everything. And I keep looking at it, I'm like, I don't think so. The way I see it and the way I explain it is, my dad, like, this is going way back and it sounds like a huge bummer, and technically it is, but it's been a long time. But my dad died right before I was 4 years old, and I was raised by my mom and my grandmother until my mom didn't get remarried until I was 20. So I grew up, all my formative years were raised by one or two women, depending on when my grandmother died. And um and so I'm like, it hit I didn't grow up in an environment that assumed that women couldn't do this or that, or that men were owed things because they were men or whatever. And then that was just my normal life, and I didn't think about other men. Like, I had male friendship because I have two brothers, like an older and younger brother that I was close to, but we were all kind of in the same boat. So when I get to this world um of shitty men, uh it was stunning at first. I'm like, what do you mean, like, people think this way? Like, surely it's just like one crazy person or one awful person who thinks that way. And I see more and more people, I'm like, oh my god, men are really awful. and it was genuinely shocking to me that, because I just didn't know that existed, and it was so weird to me, and I never grew up in that world. And I'd seen people be like sexist to my mom and stuff like that, but it was so easy to blow off growing up in East Texas because we're so ultra conservative. And so when I do photos, like, they're basically, like, my professors and other people are like, oh, it's a bunch of chicks, you're their words. And you're making sexual fantasies about them, about how you want to violate them. I'm like, I really don't think I'm saying that, because most of the people in my photos are not dressed in a way that generally is associated with this or posed in that way. And I work really hard to try to give my subjects agency. Like, if they're doing something in a photo, it's because they've chosen to do it, or we've decided mutually, I think, to the photo can look this way, or this thing is happening in the photo. And finally, and it's been hard for me to figure out exactly what it's like. Well, why don't I feel that connection with men? And as an aside before I finish this, because I just go all over the place, but one of the things I feel like is the problem is the kind of toxic masculinity of conservative areas, where women, it's okay for women to be seen and to show off in photos, but men feel like that's kind of a girly thing, I guess, or a feminine trait or something. And men don't allow themselves that level of expression and more toxic cultures. So it's hard for me to say to the 10 millionth guy in a bad t-shirt and jeans in the same uniform, does like, I want to take your photo. That's interesting. Uh, when there's like a bunch of more willing, um, like females and all that stuff. But and I live in East Texas, where presenting gender in a different way is getting easier, but is also harder to come by, and people are more cautious about presenting in ways that are outside of the norm. So I wouldn't have like in a bigger city where I could have like a really amazing queer subculture I could get into or something like that. Just for an example. But so I had the hardest time figuring out, it's like, why do I connect with women? I really honestly don't think it's because I've got the hots for all of them and want to, skeeve my way into something. and so just off, it wasn't even on topic. A friend posted, it was kind of silly, like those gender coordinates map. They had this little quiz, and I'm like, oh, I'll do it for fun. And I wound up in this like kind of, I think it's probably pseudoscience, but it was like wound up in this kind of feminine quadrant of the map. And I posted, like, here, I did this the other day, for giggles. And my friend, who I've photographed before, and she's like, oh, so you associate more, or you identify more emotionally with women, I guess. That makes sense, because you take picture, like, that's why you take pictures of them, because that's the type of person you emotionally connect with more. She said it better than that, but like, that's actually exactly what I've been trying to say for I don't know how long. But these people, the connection there is like there's some kind of emotional, like, kind of coherence between the people I wind up photographing, I think. And that just so happens in this area to happen more with that type of person in the photos. And if that makes any sense at all.
Oh, no, it does, like,
Okay.
completely. I have like a friend who also he grew up in like a mostly like dominant like female household,
Yeah.
and his personality, he could definitely easily get mistaken as like very flamboyant and
Yeah.
not straight, but he is straight. And
Yeah.
at the same time, he also just photographs females. Not like he doesn't ever shoot like or photograph men, but
Yeah.
he also has the same like mindset where it's just because of the connection and has nothing necessarily because he wants to like just capture women in a
Yeah.
provocative way of some sorts. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was very interesting that you mentioned that, because this is like the second time I've now heard that, and
Yeah.
for me, that makes me question like my connection in like who I photograph.
Yeah.
It's like
Eh,
probably not necessarily the subject. It's more like, yeah,
yeah.
your connection with the person.
Yeah. It's an interest in that person beyond like just prurient prurient interests, which is what bothered me so much about everyone who would have a negative comment to say about, oh, I see what you're into looking at your photos. Like, it's like, that's pretty dismissive of the people. But also, I found it interesting that I had these professors who are by all means, like, I would think, feminist and should be pretty open-minded, uh, saying that the women I photographed were too stupid to know that they were being taken advantage of for the photographs. And it's like, that doesn't sound right at all. That's pretty insulting. And sure, not everyone's going to know that they're being exploited, but I'm like, that's seems really negative, and not just negative to me.
Is that connected with your grad school?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you like that was a correlation with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gee.
that was just kind of like 3 years of them telling me that I was a liar until I admitted that they were sexual assault fantasies. I'm like, I really don't think you're looking like, if all you have to do is go to a photography group on Facebook and see the sexy women photos that kind of like compare them. Nothing, not to knock that necessarily, especially if the women in there are totally okay with that and that's how they like to express themselves. But you can tell the guy with the camera from the person who's at least attempting to take pictures of interesting people.
Yeah, no, 100%. You could definitely tell the
Yeah.
person's intentions in the work sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, Man, that was heavy. I was just like, oh man, no, it's such an interesting topic, but I was like, wow, like did not expect that at all.
Yeah.
But I think that's good because it doesn't make every conversation the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a topic that a lot of people don't shed light on. So
Yeah.
I'm like really appreciative of talking about it.
Yeah. And I enjoy getting to talk about that because that was I I had, like, as you probably could tell, I had a fairly traumatic graduate school experience that just ended a couple of years ago, and that my YouTube channel was kind of a a way that I was trying to escape from that feeling that I had in that kind of depression. Basically, I just kind of started a channel because I went through grad school because I wanted to be a teacher, and there was a teaching position that was going to go open until budget cuts got rid of that. And I'm like, well, what do I do now? I like, it was basically like I was training to get a dream job, and that was the thing that was getting me through all of that trauma. And then the dream job went away as soon as I got through all of it. And and so I'm like, well, I want to like talk and try to teach about photography. And I finally kind of gave YouTube a chance around that time. Excuse me. and and so I started making videos, and that was kind of because I didn't touch film for most of about a year and a half after I got out of grad school. It was just like associated too much, and I got a friend who she's not on YouTube, but she's like Space Cadet 84 or something like that on Instagram. But she's a local friend who's moved, but she had all these questions like she wanted to get in, she was into film, but she didn't know a lot of technical stuff. I'm like, well, I basically ran a photo lab in grad school for 3 years and then worked in the darkroom at my previous job, so I know all about it. And so through talking to her so much and telling her how all these things work, I'm like, I kind of like, okay, I'll shoot a roll of film just to shoot it. And it slowly opened back up to where I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I loved about it. And so that's how YouTube kind of guided me out of the end of that, I think, in a way.
Okay, well, I don't know what you have planned, but
But
hope you have a good one.
thank you. I hope you do too.
Yeah, I'll be
Thanks
stuck.
for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
I'm always like ending these Zoom calls are always weird.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh no, the thing's cutting out. It's like the phone, like there's interference. Okay, well,
Yeah. Okay. Wait,
okay.
bye.
Bye.